So our next speaker thinks it's time to take back control of the narrative, something we were talking about just now, and take leadership in this space. So please welcome Patrick Wall, who is the Professor of Public Health at the University of Dublin.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to welcome all of you who aren't from Ireland to Ireland. And I'd like to compliment Sean on a fascinating story. I think there was a lot of people who had the hair standing on the back of their head listening to him, and it's not simple, you know, not simple. What I want to talk about is that the food industry is really in the human health business. During the COVID, we heard a lot about the health professionals, the doctors and the nurses. But the doctors and the nurses, they're not really the health professionals. They're the sickness professionals. They're focused on looking after the sick. And so as food safety professionals, you're true health professionals, because you make a mistake, people will get sick. And so it's interesting that in the Consumer Goods Forum, there's several other coalitions, as well as the GFSI standards. And so there's a huge contribution to healthier living, which is one of the coalitions. So you can look at the GFSI standards in isolation of some of the other coalitions. And sometimes we're trying to stovepipe them. So the first thing I'm going to look at is food versus pharma. And increasingly people think they can get a pill for every ill. And I'm a medical doctor, but I'm also a vet. But currently I work at teaching medical students. And the medical students in Ireland are no different from the medical students in most jurisdictions. They spend 2 years learning pharmacology, and they might get 1, 2, 3 in Ireland lectures on nutrition. So like if you asked a doctor for a prescription, if you go to any doctor in Ireland or in Europe, you'll find first thing you leave is with a prescription for drugs. So we've gone for a therapeutic solution rather than a nutritional solution for many conditions. And so in every town in Ireland and every city that you are in, you'll see increasing numbers of drugstores on the street. So we've left, we're training not doctors, drug dealers, I think. Now, it's interesting that big pharma is making a huge killing out of obesity. So we've created a problem in the food industry, and pharma, the share price of these products has gone through the roof. So Wegovy is a family of drugs that Ozempic, they were developed for diabetes, and a side effect of the drug was it slowed down your gut motility. And they discovered that you started to lose weight, because when you went to eat your lunch, you couldn't eat your lunch because your breakfast was still in your stomach. And when you went for your dinner, your lunch was still in your stomach, so the weight falls off them. And it's a fantastic drug, but it's actually phenomenal share price now. And the drug companies are making a fortune out of something that the food industry created and could prevent. So that's actually therapeutic agents that you have to have a prescription for. But increasingly, people think they don't get enough supplements, enough vitamins and minerals from their food. And it's a huge industry now, getting supplements. And it's quite interesting. You go to any of the drugstores, there's shelves and shelves of drugs. And so this is actually one from Ireland now. This is actually a small town, not a big town. For the Irish, it's Navan. But there's a whole chain of warehouse-type pharmacies. And it's like a supermarket of supplements. And you say, what's wrong with the food industry if the public are going here for these products? And so the question is we're doing something very wrong. We're doing something very wrong. Ultra-processed food, that's like an evil word. You'll hear people say, oh, ultra-processed food, oh, couldn't we have that, you know? So, we did a survey in Ireland in Safe Food where we asked people, what are you worried about in food safety? And 6%, it was in young people, 6% of them additives came in. That was last year. This year they did the same survey again, and it went to 12%. So then they said, how could it double in 12 months? What have we done so differently in Ireland? And so they went back to the respondents and said, what's happened? And it's got to do with Robert Kennedy, the US Health Secretary, who says additives are an abomination. So it just shows you, it's back to what Sean Summers was saying, that what's in the media is what people believe, you know. So we failed to tell people the positive attributes. Like, you're all food safety professionals, but the amount of additives that we have that actually make food safer. So we're not telling people why they're there. We also have products that extend the shelf life and stop spoilage and stop wastage. So, like, sustainability in the consumer's eyes is a good word, but some of these products that stop spoilage and wastage are actually ultra-processed products. Jesus, don't touch them, you know. So we fail to tell people why the products are. People are worried about their health and they're worried about nutrition because they're going to the drugstores for their supplements, yet we fortified products with vitamins and minerals and increased fiber content to benefit the public health, but we seem to have failed to communicate that. We've also failed to communicate that the scientific and regulatory oversight, that all of the ingredients are scientifically tested and approved by the regulators. My sister is a psychologist. She's a modicum of intelligence, and she says, oh, I'd never have food with E numbers in it. It's full of E's. And I said, those E's are all the approved ones. The ones that haven't got the E number are the ones you want to worry about. So food security is a huge issue, and currently with the global conflicts in the world, a lot of supply chains are disrupted. So we're conscious of, the public is conscious about global food security, but because of the ingredients that we're able to add to food, it has enabled mass production and enabled safe distribution globally to feed the growing world population. We failed to communicate that. It's interesting that quite a subset of the population are quite vocal about plant-based meats and dairy alternatives. And they think this is good for health and good for sustainability. But there's a fair bit of processing. So while I'm against ultra-processed food, I'm pro plant-based meats, or I'm pro some of the dairy alternatives. The industry seems to have failed to communicate the amount of reformulation that has gone on to benefit public health, like reducing sugar, reducing salt, reducing trans fats, reducing saturated fats, and increasing fiber. And when you ask people to define what ultra-processed food is, a lot of people have vague definitions. They're inconsistent, they're misleading, and one of the kind of crude definitions is that food has 5 or more ingredients that you wouldn't find in the domestic kitchen. Now, there's lots of things that aren't in the domestic kitchen that are good for you. But so the context of why they're there, we fail to communicate that. So we need to tell people why they're there, what they're doing, and how they're doing it, you know. So the next thing I'll just touch on, and I'm just touching in, this is actually to give you an idea of this is a survey that was done in Canada, and it was asking people what they think of clean labels, because the public said, oh, we want clean labels. Clean labels aren't scrubbed clean with Brillo, no. They're free from artificial ingredients. What's an artificial ingredient? You know, natural organic claims. This is what people think. No pesticides or chemicals or toxins. Free from allergens. No GMOs. Oh, those GMOs. Oh, fuck, they're bad things. Minimally processed. Simple, short ingredient list. You don't need to be a nutritionist with the eyes of a hawk to read the nutrition list, you know. Transparent packaging. And then there's quite a number of people that didn't know what a clean label was, if it bit them. But it's quite interesting that in that discount chemist last week, I bought vitamin D, and there's a whole shelf section devoted to vitamin Ds because everybody's deficient of vitamin D. We don't get enough sunlight. But the interesting thing about the vitamin D was just to look at the amount of ingredients that were in the vitamin D. And people say, well, that vitamin D is good stuff. Very good for you. Good for your bones. Good for your skin. But look at all the ingredients that are involved there. Now, if that was a foodstuff, that would be deemed an ultra-processed product. Don't touch it. But how is it that the public accept ingredients in supplements, which are good for us, and the same ingredients are in food, they're inherently evil? So we failed. Increasingly, we keep hearing that a plant-based diet is healthier for us and healthier for the planet. Now, there's no question about that we should all eat more fruit and veg, and as a medical doctor, I can say that. Do you need to go on a complete sole plant-based diet? If you want to, you can. It's a free country. You can do whatever you like. But the idea to promote this as a panacea, and it's the answer. So it's interesting that we cannot feed the world organically. So if we were going to feed the whole world on a plant-based diet, we need to use a lot more agrochemicals than we're currently using. But the very people who are calling for a plant-based diet, they're not calling for safer plant protection products. They're calling for no sprays at all. So maybe we'll actually, the answer to the solution is no sprays, organic products. We'll use genetically engineered crops that are resistant to disease, that don't require sprays. But the very people who want the plant-based diet, they don't want GMOs either. And so when I was the chair of the European Food Safety Authority, this was the subject that gave us the most grief. That the biotech company said we were far too slow in approving GMOs, and the NGOs all said we were far too fast, we were reckless, we were cavalier. It was unreal. And so the amount of interest, I even went on a television program with a Euro MP who banged her fist on the table and said, I demand food with no genes in it. There's a challenge for you now. So you couldn't tell an elected representative of the people that they're talking through the anal sphincter. So I said, I'll do my best, but I can't guarantee it. And when I was there, I'll just tell you a story that I was actually called up to the Agricultural Committee of the European Commission. And they were very angry with EFSA. And I was the chair of EFSA at the time. They said, why haven't you got the European consumer to accept GMOs? Risk communication is one of your jobs. The European consumer is against GMOs. Why haven't you got them to accept it? Because our farmers are at a competitive disadvantage. We're importing chicken from Thailand, we're bringing beef and chicken from Brazil, we're bringing pigs in from Canada, and they've all been fed on GM soya, and our farmers can't use this product. So I was trying to say, well, look, I said, EFSA is a science-based organisation, and there's a lot of anti-GM stuff that's got nothing to do with science. Some people are against GM because they don't want you to modify what God created. Some people are against GM because they're pro-organic. Some people don't want conglomerates owning the food chain. Some people are against Monsanto. There's a whole lot of reasons. I thought this was a good example. It's like saying to a Muslim, the ham is safe. And he says, I don't want the ham. But it's scientifically proven to be safe. I don't want the ham. It's scientifically proven by a panel of experts from EFSA. I don't want the ham. These scientists are the best scientists in the entire European Union. I don't want the ham. So I don't know how that translated, because they were translating it into 4 or 5 languages. But anyway, when I arrived back in Parma, the headline in the local paper was, Chairman of EFSA says the ham is safe. And the mayor of Parma sent me a present of a Parma ham. And it was one of these hams. The Parma hams are like a vintage wine. And this one had been down in the caves for 36 months. It was the real deal, the real deal. But maybe if you look at consumer sentiment now, it might be different, because all the publicity about the messenger RNA vaccines and Omicron variants and different variants and GMO and genetically engineered vaccines, maybe people might think that genetic engineering isn't a bad thing. But genetic engineering and gene editing are 2 major advances. And it's difficult for us if we can't get the public to accept innovations. Like we've heard a lot about innovations in food technology, but if the public are against them, where are we really going? I'll tell one story against a colleague. He's not here. He was a director of Walmart. And I was at a conference in the US, and we were having a beer after the conference. This was about 20 years ago now. At the time, we were in the eye of the storm with GMOs in Europe. So I said to him, what do you think about GMOs, Joe? And he just looked at me. He didn't know what I was talking about. And he said, I drive a BMW myself. So that was the land of the free, or not so free. It's interesting that the plant varieties we have now are not the plant varieties that our grandfathers grew. So to get new plant varieties, we bombard the seed with colchicine, which is a mutagen, or irradiation to get mutant seeds. Then we plant them all, and then we actually examine them all to see which ones have the positive traits, and we grow them up. But while there's a lot of calling for GMO labeling, like you'll never see this label on pasta. This pasta is made from irradiated mutant wheat. No, that's the conventional stuff. That's the good stuff. So like we really are failing to engage properly with the consumers. The question I'm asking now is another little quickie, is the game over for red meat? There's a lot of adverse publicity about red meat. Red meat is bad for our health, ruminants are bad for the environment, and we should all be on a plant-based diet. Now, it's interesting that explain this to me. Ireland has two indigenous industries. One is agri-food and the other is tourism. But we export a lot of beef from the country. But the price of beef cattle in Ireland has reached unprecedented levels. So in Europe, beef has never been more expensive for the live animals. So if the game is over for red meat, how do you explain this global demand for meat? So the Lancet published a paper on the global burden of diseases where they actually said there was a 36-fold higher instance of mortality associated with red meat. And myself and a few other scientists challenged them that their model used in the global burden of disease was wrong. And they published our letter highlighting why the model was wrong. And they acknowledged the model was wrong, but they never withdrew the first paper. And that first paper has now been referenced about 365 times since it was published. And I've been at many conferences where people reference the first letter that red meat is bad for you. But the letter that we wrote in to correct it, nobody references that, you know. So the question is, could we have a climate-friendly cow? So these are two Irish cows. You'd know by the look of them, wouldn't you? Anyway, the thing is that we're actually trying to find, like a cow has 4 stomachs. So the first stomach is like a fermentation vat. And the idea is, could you modify the microbiome in the rumen to produce less gas and hopefully no methane? Now, it was interesting where in the UK earlier this year, Arla Dairy Co-op, they decided as part of one of their sustainability initiatives to use a methane additive, encourage all the farmers to use this methane additive called nitroxypropanol. It's produced by DSM, and it cuts down. Cows fed this produce 30% less methane. So they thought this was a good thing. The public are worried about methane. They're worried about ruminants. So let's actually include this. So we'll mandate that all our farmers will use this. And they got a massive backlash, you know, toxic chemical being added, and they were advocating, the social media campaigns were there to throw the milk down the Kazi, don't take any of their products. It was unbelievable. So you're trying to do the right thing and backfires, you know. Animal welfare is a huge issue. Many, many jurisdictions it's an issue. And maybe not in Spain where bullfighting is the national pastime. But anyway, I was at a talk in the States, and I was talking about how the social media amplifies food scares. And as I got up to talk, I said, my name is Patrick Wall, I come from Ireland, I'm a vet and a medical doctor, and I come from Ireland. It's a little green island, the breadbasket of Europe. Agri-food is one of our big industries, and in animals in Ireland can have a better quality of life anywhere else in the world, and at the end of their lives, they're humanely slaughtered. And this lady put up her hand and said, excuse me, Professor Wall, you can't use those two words together, humanely slaughtered. And I said, what do you mean? She says, they're an oxymoron, which means they contradict each other. Humane is something kind, and slaughter is something evil. You're slaughtering something. So therefore, I didn't argue with her. And I said, look, I think you might have a point. We'll chat it over the coffee. So just to keep the thing going. But like, you can see the point that she was making, you know. And I actually used to teach food safety to the vets in our university. And at the end of the course, one year, one of the veterinary students, a vet now, would want to be a vet, wrote, the most traumatic day of my life was the day Patrick Wall brought us to the abattoir. So while some people like eating meat, they don't want to think about animals getting slaughtered. So this is a huge, huge issue for us, to address animal welfare. And if people don't like humane slaughter, halal slaughter, actually people are very nervous about this altogether, but there's 1.6 billion consumers, Muslim consumers in the world, so it's a huge market segment for halal meat. Now, many of the supermarkets, they want to have halal meat for this 1.6 billion consumers, but they don't want to switch off their other consumers. And some of the UK, well, all of the UK supermarkets won't take halal, won't take meat from slaughterhouses in Ireland that also do halal. Also, many of the Michelin star restaurants, they want to entertain rich Arabs, people with an oil well in their back garden, but they want to be able to offer them halal. So they want to have a logo on the menu that won't switch off their other customers. Currently, there are over 400 approved halal certification bodies. Over 400, and many more halal logos that aren't certified at all. So this is a huge issue. Now, the Saudi Food and Drug Authority, they have a halal centre, and they've come up with they're trying to address this issue. They said they're coming up with a halal scheme. They want it to be the global scheme, but it's more than a halal scheme. It has 3 pillars. One is food safety, so it's compliance with all the food safety regulations. That's one. Then compliance with all the ritual slaughter requirements for halal. And the other one is a quality assurance dimension, where they look at sustainability, traceability, and ethics, fair trade, and all that. So this is a quality assurance scheme with a halal component. And they're hoping this will be the Rolls Royce of all schemes. And as it comes from the land of Mecca, it's been approved by the Islamic associations, etc. So you'll hear more about this one. But basically, they'll have a QR code on the logo, and it will actually, when you look at the logo, it'll give you halal authenticity, food safety assurance, traceability, and they will have DNA traceability like we heard earlier on. Because if you look at a piece of meat, you can't do a test on it to see that it's halal, but if you have the DNA trace back, at least you can trace it back to a halal facility. And they have digital supply chain transparency, quality and sustainability, and consumer engagement. So this might be a positive, and we'll have to just watch this space, you know. Today, for consumer perception is reality, and we heard from Sean about telling the story and being honest with the consumer, and so Sean, that was a fantastic story, and compliments for sharing it with us. But Sean's story was in a different communication landscape. Now with the social media, it's much more challenging, and it's much more challenging to correct those issues that we need to address. But we need to tell the full story. We need to use some of the tools that have been highlighted by some of the in the trade stands, like QR codes, traceability platforms, open supply chain data, and virtual reality to educate the consumer. And educating the consumers is challenging because it's hard to make food safety sexy, but you have to reinvent the story continuously and create accessible content. And we have to demystify the food technology. Food technology is advanced. Many of you are food scientists, but we're great at talking to each other, like a little echo chamber. But we need to engage with people and convince people who are outside. We need to partner with credible scientists and third-party validators. And we need to leverage influencers thoughtfully. So use value-driven influencers who understand food. And we need to monitor the social sentiment. And now there's actually search engines that can monitor blogosphere. So you know what people are getting angst about, and you can respond quickly with clarity and with the facts. And Sean said it there in his talk, but we need to shape the narrative, not just defend it. Because once the genie's out of the bottle and you're after it, you can't get it back. So we need to monitor sentiment, get out first with the story. And somebody said it at one of the meetings earlier on, you know, you can't beat the influencers, so you've got to join them. So this is a huge issue. Because when a mistruth is repeated enough, people start believing it. And we can see that at the moment. We just get little flashes of news, and you keep getting the same news all the time, no more than the flash, but eventually it must be true, or it wouldn't be coming from so many different sources. We need to not be ashamed of our innovation. We have some brilliant food scientists, so we need to lead on innovation and describe how the innovation works. Like gene editing, GMOs, whole genome sequencing, there's a whole lot of things we can do, and we've got a lot of initiatives that make food healthier, and you know, the antioxidants in food that can actually slow down cancer, slow down the aging process. Imagine, look at the way the industry in cosmetics, people are rubbing in creams to make them young. Like I keep horses now. There's no way I'm rubbing in moisturizer cream into the horses to make them shine. But when I add oil to the feed, they start gleaming, you know. We need not to be afraid to address uncomfortable topics. Animal welfare, humane slaughter, these are issues that people are, and you won't convince everybody. But if you don't address, you'll lose the middle ground. They'll move to the left on you. We need to collaborate on policy and standards, and we've heard a lot about that here over the last 2 days. And we need to engage with the regulators and the certification bodies. And like we talk about sharing data with the regulators, we talked a lot about that yesterday, but the regulators are risk averse, and they, by nature, people in the industry are entrepreneurs. They take risks because that's the name of the game, and they're a different type of an animal. And like a regulator, you share your data with me. Am I going to hold on to the data? Am I going to share it on with somebody else? Because I don't want to be challenged 3 months' time when somebody dies. When did you first know about this whole genome sequences that was in this product? 3 months ago, and you never did anything. So like, it's not simple. Harmonizing standards, we've heard a lot about that. And actually, building trust is all about engaging with the public. But there's a whole new, as I said, communication landscape. But we also need to engage with our own staff. Our own staff need to understand the risks. And, the food industry is populated by a migrant workforce often, and often they're not members of Mensa. So it's challenging to keep your workforce educated, but you've got to do it. So basically, social media influence, one time we used to talk about, we'll wheel out the scientists. They're speaking a different language. Some scientists, when they go on the television, they'd frighten you. And other scientists, you think they're speaking in Mandarin. Brands and reputations, as Sean said, can be destroyed overnight by viral misinformation. And then you're denying it. You can't get it back. People say there's no smoke without fire. The vacuum left by inaction is filled by fear-driven narratives and diet fads. There's so many people out there giving an example of a diet based on a sample of one themselves. Rising tensions between consumer expectations and scalable food solutions. Like, we have to explain to the public that we need to mass produce food so it can be affordable, so we can feed everybody. And so the idea of little niche products that people love, not for everybody. Silence is no longer an option. And Sean, that was way back in 2003, he showed the success of his stories as he went out first. And Michael McCain with Maple Leaf, he went out. So like, this is going out in peacetime. In fact, if you go out enough in peacetime, people will start to trust you more and more. When you do have a crisis, they'll be able for you. So you're in the human health business. So after today, when you go home, what business are you in? You're not in the food business, you're in the human health business. Doctors and nurses, they're in the sickness business. But you're also in the communication business, because we've got to tell people we're in the human health business, that we're not some kind of monsters trying to poison them with ultra-processed food. We're trying to help people and help their families. The food industry can't afford to be reactive. Media is so instant now. We just got to be on top of it. Proactive is the word now. We've got to stand up to pseudoscience. Your voice matters. So, like, if you don't say something, some other Luddite is going to say something, and they're away, and then you can't stop it, Transparency, courage, and integrity, because the future food depends on it. And as Sean said, just tell the truth. Tell us what we're doing and why we're doing it. Emphasize that we're in the health business. All the time, we should be saying we're in the health business. And the old adages that you are what you eat is as true now as ever before. And people need to have a balanced diet. So lots of things are bad for you if you eat too much of them. But we need to explain to people that if I'm a medical doctor, I can guarantee it's a medical fact. If you don't eat, you're dead, right? So you're in a very good business. People have to eat. They don't have to do other things, but they have to eat. And so that's something that people are very attached to, is their food. And this is a phenomenal business to be in, but we need to explain that we're in the health business. Thank you.